Yeah, okay, so again, I'm Lyn Ulbricht, and my son Ross Ulbricht is serving a double life sentence plus 40 years without the possibility of parole. So you figure he must have done something really bad, right? Like bomb a building, commit mass murder, slaughter people. Not even close. He wasn't charged with uh, committing any bodily harm or death to anyone. Not one, not one victim came forward at trial to say Ross had harmed them in any way. He has no history, criminal history. There's 100 letters on our website, freeross.org, from people who know him personally, attesting to his fine character and how much he has contributed to their lives. He is serving double life without parole for convictions involving the creation and running of the Silk Road website. And for those of you that don't know, the Silk Road was an online marketplace. It was created to protect the privacy and anonymity of its users. It was it was up to vendors and buyers what was bought and sold using the little-known cryptocurrency Bitcoin. It was very little known at the time. In fact, I've been told it was one of the first proof of concept experiences with Bitcoin and a testing ground for it. It drove its early adoption. And the site itself was product agnostic. So again, it was up to buyers and sellers. It was open market, unregulated, except there were rules. Ross is a very strong believer in voluntary interaction, no use of force, and so things like that were not permitted on the site. This includes the fact that there was no child pornography, for example. There was no stolen property. There was no violent services, despite what you may read in the media. Fake news exists, people, I can tell you. So there were rules, and there were many actually legal goods sold there, art and books. There's raw milk, which isn't always legal, but fairly harmless. CBD oil, medications, things like that, but also there were drugs bought and sold. It was considered by the administration a free choice. You had to know how to open a Bitcoin account and use it, and you had to know how to navigate on the Tor browser. So it wasn't as accessible as some sites like Amazon. And for this, Ross got a harsher sentence than most murderers and violent people. But who is Ross? He is and was, at the time that he created it, was a 26-year-old idealist, on fire for freedom, passionate about free markets. Here he is at Penn State. He's kneeling in the lower left with Ron Paul. He worked on the Ron Paul campaign. His libertarian views, by the way, were not permitted to be known at trial, and yet later were used against him, which I'll cover later. So he's not the murderous thug that the government and some media want to portray him as. Yet, he's being kept in this place. Here I am visiting him last September. Behind me is 3 layers of razor wire and 2 gun towers. Those are keeping you safe from Ross. And he is in a place it's where the government, besides the supermax, puts its most violent people and gangs. And he's only there because of the sentence, not because of anything on his designation or anything. The judge could have given him the mandatory minimum of 20 years, which is a long sentence. It's a generation. That wasn't long enough for her. 30 years wasn't. 50 years wasn't. This judge will not be happy until Ross leaves this place as a corpse. So she basically gave him a death sentence. It's what the ACLU calls a walking death sentence. And Ross himself said to me, he said, Mom, it's a death sentence. It just takes longer. And Ross is not unique. Life sentences have quintupled in this country since the 80s. There are now 1 in 9 prisoners serving life. Over 17,000 of them are nonviolent. Another example is a guy Ross knows in this place named Tony DeJohn. He's serving life for marijuana. 15 years ago, he was arrested for marijuana. He got a life sentence, And the federal prison, it happens to be in Colorado, where marijuana, of course, is legal. So I cannot let him die in there. I won't give up. I won't let him die in there. We're going to keep fighting. And we've now, with the help of many people here and others in the community, we're now knocking on the door of the Supreme Court about this. And Ross and his team have recently filed what's called a petition for certiorari, or cert petition for short. And it covers, with the Supreme Court, you can't get into all the violations of the trial, which there are many, and you can read about them on our website, freeross.org. But you have to have broad-reaching questions that influence and impact us all. And so there is a very important Fourth Amendment question and a Sixth Amendment question in the petition. And the petition says that the courts basically violated the Bill of Rights and those rights for Ross, and consequently all of us. And the petition is supported by 21 groups from both sides of the political spectrum in 5 amicus briefs, and we're very hopeful that it will get some attention from the court. So I just want to go over the main points of the petition, and one is a Fourth Amendment question. It's, does it violate the Fourth Amendment for the government to seize a person's private internet traffic information without probable cause, which is legalese for a good reason, or a warrant, and use that information to arrest and convict him? And it's really about, can it collect data generated by millions of individuals every day with no oversight or restriction? The Cato Institute, who was one of the groups that wrote an amicus brief, says, well, it's very clear. The Fourth Amendment does still apply online. Of course it does. That was the founders' intention. And the question is, does it? And because there's a loophole that the government has been using for almost 4 decades to violate our privacy. And it's based on this technology that was ruled on in 1979. The Supreme Court basically said in Smith versus Maryland, yes, the government can know a phone number. That was it, just a dialed phone number, because the person turned that number over to the phone company. And by doing so, they relinquished their right to privacy. And actually, some judges dissented, but it did pass. And since then, it has dramatically limited our Fourth Amendment protections in this country. So things have changed just a little bit, but the law has not. And of course now, as you all know, you can get endless amounts of information from a laptop or a cell phone, financial and credit card records, political affiliations and interests, sexual orientation and activity, religious activities, medical records, job applications, photos, documents and file sharing on the cloud, location information, browsing activity, emails, what we watch, what we post, what we buy, what we research, whom we date, what apps we use, all this without a warrant. They just do it. Get all this information, and I'm like, well, why even bother to get a warrant? I mean, if they came into your house and seized your file cabinet without a warrant, it would be clearly unconstitutional. I don't even have a file cabinet anymore. It's all on my laptop. And, it's highly revealing personal information. And then they also turn it over to the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, and then they have direct access to it. Which brings us to Ross's case. And he explained this to me. You guys are much more technical than I am, so I'm just going to do a simple thing. But it illustrates how the government can take an email address and turn it into a tracking device and track you basically like if you were an animal wearing a collar. So the first thing they did was they got Ross's email address. I personally think the NSA got it. Edward Snowden said publicly that he believes the NSA was involved in it. It's on our website. And but they have another explanation of how they got it, which is called parallel construction, making up a legal way they got it, even though the NSA illegally obtained it. That's my personal theory. But anyway, they got the email, and they put what's called a pen trap and trace device on it. There's pen register and trap and trace, together known as pen traps. And from that email, with that device, without a warrant, gave them all the data flowing from that address over the internet. From that, they identified the IP address, collected that data, and identified Ross's home address. So now we're at his house. From the world, email can be anywhere, to his house. And then the data stream coming and going from the IP address contained the MAC address, and then they had a pen trap on his devices. They can do this to any of us, and I have no doubt they do, without a warrant, without probable cause, and then at that point, it's the tracking device. Anywhere you go with your device, you are tracked, they know exactly what you're doing and where you are. And in his case, for 2 months, they used an array of electronic tools and monitored him and swept in tens of thousands of individual transmissions, possibly more, and without a warrant. And his lawyer said, wait a minute, you have to have a warrant to do this. I mean, this is very invasive. And the appellate court said, well, not really, because, there's that third-party doctrine based on a dial telephone that, nope, we don't need a warrant. And so basically, once again, the third-party doctrine is allowing the government to invade our lives. Now, the courts are addressing this. The Sandra Sotomayor, Supreme Court Justice, said it may be necessary to reconsider the premise that an individual has no reasonable expectation of privacy in information voluntarily exposed to third parties. This is ill-suited to the digital age. And she also added in another case, it's doubtful that people would accept without complaint the warrantless disclosure to the government of a list of every website they had visited in the last week or month or year. And yet that's exactly what they did in Ross's case. They can do it to any of us. And, put us on lists, I guess. What political party are you interested in? What are you doing? There's a lot of things they can do with that information. In another case that was fighting the same thing, it's called Riley, when the courts say, they made the point, when the courts say that internet traffic information is constitutionally the same as a dialed telephone number from 1979, it's like saying a ride on horseback is the same as a flight to the moon. And both are ways of getting from A to B. That's about it. So I would suggest the third-party doctrine needs to be retired with the dial telephone, and I'm hoping Ross's case can make that happen. The other issue is the Sixth Amendment. Basically the Sixth Amendment and the Constitution guarantees Americans the right to a trial by jury of 12 people, not a trial or decision by one judge. And it was written to protect us from corrupt and rogue judges. So the question is, did Catherine Forrest, the judge, violate the Sixth Amendment by using uncharged crimes? And there were several things she referenced, but the main one is murder for hire, never charged, never brought in front of a jury, never at trial, to enhance an unreasonable sentence. The appellate court, it was brought before them, and they didn't seem to be concerned about this lack of a jury deliberation, and said it significantly justifies the life sentence, even though it was never proven. And then they basically upheld what they called, quote, the power of this judge to condemn a young man to die in prison with an uncharged crime that a jury never ruled on. Here's the prosecutor in the trial addressing the jury. He got to talk about it. He said, look, you don't have to deliberate on this, and he hasn't been charged for this, but just take our word for it. He did it. And the jury's like, oh, gee, do you think that might have prejudiced them a little bit? And so he says, to be clear, the defendant has not been charged, and the government does not contend any murders happened either. So the fact remains, no charge, and again, the Sixth Amendment was written to protect us against this kind of thing, the arbitrary exercise of power of a prosecutor or judge, and the petition calls this an unmatched example of runaway judicial fact-finding. Judge Marvin Frankel said, "The almost wholly unchecked and sweeping powers we give to judges in the fashioning of sentences are terrifying and intolerable for a society that professes devotion to the rule of law." Because Ross isn't the only one. He knows a lot of people in prison. Same thing happened to. I brought it up to our lawyer at the time. I'm like, they can't do this. They didn't. And he goes, oh, yeah, they do it. They do it all the time. He's just, yeah. So, not only did Ross deny this allegation when it was not charged, but in the criminal complaint, but Curtis Green, who was a high-level admin on Silk Road, who was the supposed victim of this planned murder, and who a corrupt agent, now in prison, took pictures of him and sent it to Dread Pirate Roberts, supposedly the handle that was used by the person running it. He tweeted, he doesn't think Ross did it, that he got a raw deal, that there's a lot more to be known here, and, he thinks the sentence is awful. And anyone who knows Ross, or at least the people I've all talked to, don't believe it at all. They know Ross. They know who he is. Peaceful, compassionate person. I think that murder for hire was actually an excuse to smear him and make him seem like this evil thug and kingpin, and that the real reason, and I think the government knows that's not true, or they would have charged him. They didn't have proof. Why else wouldn't they bring it to trial? It's not because they're nice about it. They load on charges, believe me. I think Scott Greenfield, who's a criminal defense lawyer, nailed it in saying it's an idea. It was for a platform. It was for thinking that you could create a virtual agora beyond the reach of the government. And that is not, I don't like that. And Judge Forrest made this very clear at sentencing when she said, "It is notable that the reasons you started Silk Road were philosophical," and she got that right, "and I don't know that it's a philosophy left behind." So basically she's saying, I'm going to have to put you in a cage for life because you have this dangerous philosophy. She also said, there are quotes, and she didn't say Ross didn't attribute them to him, they're all anonymous quotes, but there are quotes that discuss the laws as the oppressor, and I think this is deeply troubling and very dangerous. Hello, we're allowed to say the government is the oppressor. Our founders actually told us it's our duty if we think that the government's the oppressor, and even they said, change the government. And yet this judge is violating his First Amendment rights, using it to give this unreasonable sentence, and this is forbidden. It's forbidden by Congress, it's forbidden by the First Amendment to consider political views or philosophy, and I would suggest that by doing this, she is the one who's troubling and dangerous. Well, along with the philosophy is the use of cryptocurrency. And Tor, which is, the Onion router, and it's anonymous internet use. And, I don't think Ross was the only one who saw the potential for monetary freedom with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I think the powers that be, and the financial powers that be, saw it. And Chuck Schumer, who is the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, went after Silk Road. And I believe it was because of Bitcoin. And he, made it happen, made the investigation happen. The Judge Forrest, was recommended to her position on the bench by Chuck Schumer. The lead prosecutor, Preet Bharara, was his special counsel for many years. Ross was arrested in California, and he was tried in Chuck Schumer's state. I think Schumer is all over this thing, and I believe they were very alarmed by an alternate currency that was out of their control. But people say, well, maybe that's true, and maybe, but they want to keep us safe from drugs. They want to keep us safe from drug dealers. And I go, oh, really? Then why did the biggest drug dealer and seller on Silk Road get 10 years? Why did the biggest cocaine and heroin seller get 5 years? How about the biggest meth dealer on Silk Road who got 3 years? High-level admin on Silk Road got time served 17 months, even though the mandatory minimum was 10 years. And most shocking to me is that Blake Benthall, who after the shutdown of Silk Road opened Silk Road 2.0, he was in custody for 16 days. The government said that he had an identical site, that it was actually bigger, sold more drugs and had more listings than Silk Road. They said, we've got the identical site. He did exactly the same things. 16 days later, he is out. Ross gets double life without parole plus 40 years. Why? The government says Ross is so dangerous he cannot be let out, but Blake Benthall is out of like a little over 2 weeks. Now, this is off the Bureau of Prisons website, so just so you know, I'm not making this up. This is right off their website. So Ross's release date says life. It should say death. And Blake Benthall's is November 21st, which is 16 days after his arrest. Never heard from him again. So I'm not arguing for any of these guys to do longer sentences or be back in prison or anything. I'm just saying, how about equal treatment under the law? This is the Sentencing Reform Act was passed to guarantee that. The Constitution, in its equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment, guarantees it. And I can't imagine a more extreme example of unequal protection under the law. You know, you want to make someone an example, you want to make them your trophy. Well, I'm sorry, that's not allowed. Not when you do this other things, but they're doing it. Scott Greenfield, again, wrote this quote, and I think it really exemplifies, this is not just about Ross, and it's not just about a website, and it's not about drugs. It's going to affect all of us. It's going to it's going to have precedent that will filter down to other cases and affect all of us, our Fourth Amendment rights, our Sixth Amendment rights, and other rights. And as he said, it's the birth of law as applied to our digital future. Watch it as a spectator at your peril. Don't fall for all the sensationalism in the media. There's a lot more going on here. So I told Ross I was coming. Of course, he would love to be here. And he sent a letter. I want to read. Let me just get some water. Hi, everyone. Thank you for hosting my mom and hearing all she has to say. My Supreme Court petition is on track, thanks to the support many of you have given me over the years. Truly, there is much love in this community. So, this is an exciting time for Bitcoin, isn't it? When I first learned about it, it was trading for 6 cents or so. It's incredible to see something increase 300,000-fold in value. Wow. I saw its potential back then to transform our world, and it hasn't disappointed. If anything, it's exceeded my expectations. Now there's a multitude of altcoins that have sprung up and found their niche. With dozens of coins experimenting with variations on Satoshi's invention, I have faith that we'll find the optimal path forward, learning from each other's mistakes and copying success. We are in the middle of a profound technological revolution. It's beautiful and awesome. I'm grateful just bearing witness to it. It's also a profound opportunity. Our subculture is having an outsized influence on society right now that will only grow. We are the future, my friends. I've been in prison for a few years now, so I'm out of the loop, but it's given me perspective as well. Now more than ever, we need a measure of self-reflection. Let's not forget our roots as we push ahead. Let's stay grounded in the principles that Bitcoin was incubated in: decentralization, a focus on empowering individuals in a community of love and respect. I'm proud of how we flourished and optimistic that the best is yet to come. I'm fighting every day for my freedom, and I'm hopeful that one day I'll be out there with you. All my love, Ross. So I love this picture of Ross and me. It was taken in the prison, so they finally let us have a picture. It also proves I actually am his mother and not a crazy woman running around, you know. So, but yeah, I visit him a lot, and you know, he's hanging in there. He's it's tough. It's not an easy place to be, but he's hanging in there, and guards will say to me, he doesn't belong in here. What's he doing in here? You know, kind of thing. And he's a great guy, you know. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I'm just encourage you, please learn more. Our website, we're constantly adding more to it. There's so much to this case, and we're getting pretty deeply into some of the details that are out there if you're interested. There's a timeline. There's ways to help. Lots of different ways to help. And there's, of course, monetary. Going to the Supreme Court is not exactly cheap. But also there's other ways. I really, really would like to get some good, powerful political contacts. That I could really use. And if anybody can help me with that, that'd be great. And also just follow us on Twitter and spread the word, and Facebook, and you know, just if you could spread the word and change the narrative. And you know, the media just loves the sensationalism, and you would not believe all well, you would probably all the misinformation that's generated. So that's it. I don't know if I have time to take questions or not. Thank you. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Well, let me just excuse you. You had your hand up first.
What's the timing on the Supreme Court?
Well, they're not held at any particular time, but there's another case called Carpenter. That's another Fourth Amendment case that was accepted. It's being represented by the ACLU. It's for cell phone tracking. It's actually Ross's point, which is all your internet browsing information is actually more invasive than just a cell phone. But that's supposed to be heard probably in June, and maybe they will decide on Ross's then. We're hopeful. It was already written up in the SCOTUS blog as one to watch, and you know, I think we have a good chance of getting something. So
cert has been accepted, right?
No.
Okay.
It was
you
just
don't even know if it's here.
yeah. No.
Well, my question was actually, to what extent there was a lot of action around Ross's case of people who supported him being very abusive to the judge.
There's a lot of action around Ross's case with people being very abusive and threatening to the judge, as can happen in the Twitterverse type place, right? To what extent do you think that type of activity resulted in the sentence he got?
Good question. She was doxxed. I don't know that she was actually, well, I guess some commenters on Reason, when she did give the sentence, it was post-sentencing, were very critical. And actually, the government went after them. They subpoenaed Reason and put a gag order on Reason, said, give us those names. We want to go after the people that said these things about the judge. They got such blowback about the First Amendment that they backed off. Pre-sentencing, some not helpful person doxed her. And we put up a thing. We do not support this. But I don't think it helped at all. I think it really caused her to be more, afraid. And I personally wish they hadn't done it. And so I don't know how much it influenced her. I think she had already kind of decided, but that happened early. And she actually deprived the defense of the witness list because she thought Ross might have them killed. I'm like, from jail with everything's monitored? How? Yeah, I don't think it helped at all.
Yeah, the rampant disrespect for people, unfortunately, by people part of this community is not generally helpful.
It's immature, and it's easy to do that when your little hiney is not in a cage. And you're not, you can poke the bear, but you're not the one suffering the repercussions, and it's not thinking it through. It's reckless. I agree. Wish they hadn't done it. Okay? Yeah?
Have you been able to talk to Charlie Shredder in relation to Silk Road at all after the design?
No, I haven't talked to Charlie. Thanks. No.
Has there been a third-party audit of the electronic forensic evidence that the FBI has, or is that possible? And how can we do that?
Yeah, that is a really good question. Actually, the judge just recently, Ross's lawyer submitted a motion to extend 90 days getting stuff from the government, newly discovered evidence, and she denied it. She denied it. I'm like, 90 days, you can't let us look through stuff. They stonewall, there's the corrupt agents who are involved in this, I didn't even cover them, but they were not allowed to be known to the jury. There were 2 corrupt agents who were all over the site, stole money. They're in prison now. There's still sealed evidence about them. All their emails are still encrypted. They keep everything very tight to the vest, and I don't know how you do it. I would love to do it, and that's what we're trying to do, is get a hold of it and then be able to go through this information, but it's difficult. Oh, well, actually, that's another thing. It's on our site. There's so much, I don't want to take up too much time, but it's like after trial, we found, well, not we, but the defense found proof of tampering of evidence by probably a third corrupt agent. Also found that Dread Pirate Roberts signed into Silk Road when Ross was in jail and in solitary. It's all there, and there was a press conference. There's Motherboard wrote about it, others, and we can't bring it up until the next trial, if there is one, because it was after the trial, and so there's a lot there. There's so much that we don't know.
We have time for, what, 1-2 more questions, and then
Okay.
we have to wrap, but
Okay.
please.
Yeah.
You know how they found the website since it was using
The server? Well, no. The FBI agent under oath claimed how he found the server, and experts all over the world said that is gibberish. That is essentially a lie. And that we said, hey, how about an evidentiary hearing so we can really delve into this? And the judge denied it.
Last question.
rights and all that, you know, the fight for that, but what are the prospects to get a pardon, to get Ross out here with us?
That's why I'm asking for the connections, you know. It's like, I don't know, or commutation of sentence even.
I think you got somebody that understands.
Yeah, I mean, well, actually, a lot of the same methods with the pen traps were used, according to William Binney, on President Trump. So I just need to get his ear and say, hey.
They're big forces.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hey, anybody know anybody, or know anybody who knows somebody?
All right, everybody. Lyn, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.